Is Insight. Phone lines are open. Dial 384-2191.
Into a Friday here, the second Friday of the month of February 2021, and we're coming to you live here on WDLB Radio. You can join us at 384-2191 or 384-2192 here this morning. We'll get you into the program. And we're also coming to you on Marshfield Media Access in video, because on the second Friday of the month, we talk with Marshfield PD. And joining me in here this morning is Lieutenant, is it?
Correct. Travis
Esser. Give me a moment. I was running cold here this morning. Yes, it has. And acting or Assistant Chief Pat Zepps. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this kind of cold, I'm sure, takes a toll on you guys as well, having to be out in it, and the response times or anything like that. Do you do anything different, like put any doubling up on shifts or backups or anything like that when it's this miserable outside?
Yeah, not so much on the personnel side. Where the real challenges come in is the keeping the fleet mobile and ready to go. So, we do have some benefit now. We got a little more inside storage, and that really helps a lot. But yeah, just, you might see some of the squads running a little more than normal. We shut them down. It gets pretty hard to warm them back up. So that's one of our bigger issues, is just on the equipment side.
Well, you brought that up. Was anything done with the former Baltus property? Are you guys using that, or is?
Yeah, we are temporarily using that, and it has been, I would like to say, don't want to say we're spoiled, because we're able to get a lot in there. And what that really does is it cuts down on our idling time. I mean, originally we'd have to come in and probably start, what do you think, Travis, 5 to 7 cars up on any given morning and let them run for half an hour. We don't have to do that anymore. So that's really been a nice benefit for us.
So the Second and Chestnut property, the city owns that now, and you've been using that garage area?
Correct.
What else do you have? I mean, other than, I know you have an armored vehicle, that you just can't park that anywhere, a little high.
Yeah, that's a little high, but it does fit in there, so we're able to keep it heated. We also have our special response team command post ambulance in there, and then we're able to put basically our entire detective fleet in there, so which is normally would be parked on the south side of the PD lot, so we're able to free up a whole bunch of those spots while keeping the detective fleet warm. So even if they get called in for something, they're ready to go.
So don't mind my calling it, but the toys and stuff, how much stuff do you guys have? I know the Sheriff's Department has boats and snowmobiles and ATVs and all kinds of fun stuff. Do you guys have any fun stuff?
I think I listed the two that we have, which is the Special Response Team ambulance and the armored rescue vehicle. We haven't really had much cause for a boat extraction up on the upper pond yet, so but there are places we can call should we need that. So although there, I have seen vehicles go in there, but
there's do they plow that up around the top upper pond area?
Yeah, that's all access for drive through. I took a ride through there and looked at the mountain goat the other day, and he looks healthy, so
that area is kind of off and in out of sight, so to speak. Nefarious activities.
Well, we do patrol it. It's on the regular patrol circuit, so not a lot of problems in there, I would say. So, yeah.
This time of the year here, obviously miserably cold for all of us. I noticed yesterday morning just a lack of traffic in general, and then we're on a pandemic here, and then to have cold temperatures, and people are supposed to stay in from the health aspect, but also just plain miserable going out. It just doesn't seem like there's as many people out and around anymore.
Yeah, yesterday was one of those mornings where you walk outside and it just really literally takes your breath away, the cold when you breathe it in, and it was a different level of cold than what we had up until yesterday. It was pretty bad.
Does that really prevent anything? I mean, are the no-goodniks subject to the cold too? I mean, or does it become an opportunity because people are a little bit lax?
I think I think we have overall probably a little less activity in that extreme cold, just for the fact, like you said, that people don't want to go out and be in that for any lengthy period of time. So things slow down a little bit that way, and like you said, traffic does as well too, just because of people not wanting to take that trip to the store for something that they may not really necessarily need, and maybe wait till tomorrow or the next day when it warms up a little bit.
So we're talking with, you just listened to Travis Esser, Lieutenant with Marshfield PD. Also here is Acting Chief Pat Zepps here this morning on the Inside program, 384-2191, 384-2192. Well, we haven't had any gunplay as of late, so that's one thing we can check off here. Not a whole lot happening there, but I did hear about some thefts in the area of different sorts, whole vehicles and sometimes just parts.
Right, yeah. We've had, since the first of the year, we've had a string of motor vehicle thefts. So I think 5 or 6 vehicles we've had stolen that have all been recovered, but we're still working on those cases. They're open right now. So we do have information that's developed on those, but I guess wanted to talk a little bit about those today, mainly to bring up some ideas or ways that we can thwart those from happening in the future for people. And the most obvious thing is lock your vehicle when you're not around it, because all of these vehicles that we've had stolen thus far have all been unlocked vehicles and in parking lots or parked along the roadway within the city. And so number one thing, lock your vehicles. And I guess I'd bring that up especially during this time when the weather's extremely cold and a lot of us are pretty tempted to start up our vehicle and let that run. And if you have an older vehicle, you might not have the option to have that vehicle locked while it's running. So I guess I would just advise people that if you're going to do that, make sure you kind of keep an eye on it while it's warming up out there, and to continually lock it whenever possible.
So what's behind this? I don't want to call it a rash. It just seemed like at some point, but this has been going on. They're after parts.
Yeah, so there's that part of it too. So we've had the vehicles that have been stolen there, and those have not been stolen for parts. But we also have had, and maybe people have seen, there's a national trend out there right now of catalytic converters being stolen off of vehicles.
That floored me.
Yeah. So
what?
So we unfortunately are not immune to that, and we've had 4 of those, I think, since the first of the year as well, including one just last night. So that's hitting our area, and that's something else that we want people to be aware of if possible. Obviously, if you can park in a well-lit area or a secured garage of some sort, please do that so that you don't fall victim of that. It's a very expensive fix to get that replaced.
Well, 2 things. One, it's not like you're taking a tire off. You mean you got to have a welder in your pocket, or how do they take the whole car, and how does that happen?
No, so it's just it's the item located within the exhaust between the engine and the rear portion of your vehicle that captures pollutants. And so somebody can go in there with a hacksaw, and nowadays I'm sure a lot of people are using battery-operated sawzalls to saw that chunk of metal off, and it contains some pretty rare high-dollar metals in there that's used to scrub out pollutions. And those have gone up so drastically in cost here in the last couple of years that there's a black market that exists out there for those materials, and that's what people are doing. They're taking them, trying to sell them to scrap yards. Those are being turned over to recyclers, and then they're getting sold. So right now, I just looked today, I think so rhodium and palladium are the materials in there, if I'm pronouncing those right, and they're going for like $21,000 an ounce right now. And so it's created quite the stir across the nation for people to be stealing those items.
Who knew? A catalytic converter. I mean, those that I've seen years ago, they were big. They were probably a 2x2 and heavy. Underneath had a little separate guard underneath there, so you didn't hit, a tree didn't come up and hit it or something along that line. But now they're just in the exhaust line, like a coffee can size almost.
Right.
And they just saw them out, huh?
Yeah. And so obviously that's somewhat of a difficult thing to prevent if you're a car owner and you don't want that to happen, but I have heard of some pretty interesting ways to try to prevent that. Some auto dealerships or car maintenance shops have actually deflated their tires and dropped those vehicles down so low that people can't crawl under there. And
you'd have to be pretty thin anyway.
Right, yeah, on some vehicles for sure. But other people that have, medical fabricating abilities and skills have gone under there and welded their own protective plate right over the top of that to try to prevent that from happening. Especially, there's people in different states that have had it happen to them 2 or 3 times already. And when you're talking about, $2,000 or $3,000 fixes each time, that almost becomes more than your vehicle's worth at some point, and you got to do something to prevent those thefts.
I always thought criminals were lazy. Not so much anymore. That's a pretty hard steal to
Right.
take a catalytic converter.
Yeah.
You got to work at that. Get a job.
Right.
Yeah, well, agreed. Yeah.
I mean, crying out loud, that's tough. And I didn't realize what were in those, that any of that, metals, how this gets around. And once it does, I guess, it hits the black market or the dark web or whatever they call it nowadays that people communicate on, that information spreads quickly. But catalytic converter, yeah, I suppose on the higher trucks, on the pickups and stuff, it'd be easier to get under. But a regular car or a low car, you have to bring a jack in your pocket or something,
Right.
a bottle jack, and that's not light. Try to get it up and then take the chance you'll knock it off of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, ingenuity. You just use your powers for good, my wife used to say.
Right. Yeah.
But talking with Travis Esser, Lieutenant, Marshfield PD, also here is Acting Chief Pat Zepps on today's Insight program. You can call 384-2191, 384-2192 here on this second Friday in the month of February. You know that if you're listening, but you may be viewing us on Marshfield Media Access, as we are going to be coming to you on Channel 989 on your Charter Digital tier, rotating throughout the month, and also on their sites, marshfieldmediaaccess.org. You can watch it on your phone or your laptop, as the case may be. So the vehicle thefts, what are they doing with these? Is Chop Shop taking them to Chicago, or any particular brands? Or
No, it's more along the lines of what we would consider joyriding. So they're taking them to get from point A to point B, and then leaving them sit when they get where they want, or at least in a general area, so that it doesn't tip us off to the specific location. Obviously, they're not parking in the driveway where they live or anything like that.
But when it's this cold, maybe they just need a ride. Huh?
Right, sometimes, and don't have a vehicle. And so, like I said, we have some suspects on those thefts, and we're currently working pretty actively on that. So hopefully we'll bring those to an end soon. But again, just kind of an awareness and an acknowledgement of that out to our listeners, so that they can lock those vehicles up and help us prevent more of those from occurring.
Do we have a lot of outside interests coming in here to the city? I mean, we do. That's how the drug pipeline generally works. I mean, it isn't necessarily always made here or produced here, but it's brought here because there's always a market.
We've had strings of that at different times over the course of the last number of years, and so we've seen people from different states come through, steal something from our community, steal something from Stevens Point, steal something from Wausau, and then take it to a different state and try selling it and offloading it there. In fact, there's been a few cases of that somewhat recently that the Sheriff's Department has handled and that we have handled, but you'll see a lot of that with ATVs, snowmobiles, trailers, vehicles. They might take a vehicle, take the plates off it, go, 2 hours away, and then take a trailer, and then they'll go 2 hours from there and take a snowmobile or something like that, load it on the trailer, and then try to offload all of that stuff later in a different state. And so we've had that, thankfully not super frequently, but it has occurred.
Do you get cooperation, or how do you find people that are doing that kind of thing from state? It's bad enough out of the community, but over state lines is even tougher, I would imagine.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's communication things in place for that. There's entities that have acronyms that I can't even remember what they all mean right now, but there are interstate agencies that kind of track some of that stuff that can link us all together in our local agencies when they see some of that property pop up. And as obviously, like for here, like if we have something stolen, we're going to enter that serial number or registration number or whatever it is from that item into a national database as well. So if a different state agency comes across that piece of property and they run that number, they're going to say, oh, this is stolen out of Wisconsin, and we can backtrack that from there. And then pretty soon we're linking all of that together, between agencies. And nowadays, a lot of it, honestly, video surveillance is helping a lot when people are going to these places and taking trailers or snowmobiles or four-wheelers. We're seeing, this same truck that showed up at this place is showing up at this place as well. And so as technology increases, I think we've become and gotten better at that interagency communication.
Talking with Lieutenant Travis Esser here on today's Insight program with the Marshfield PD here on WDLB, 384-2191 or 384-2192. As far as these people, they like their shopping, going down and taking stuff and taking it out of the community. Seems like that would be the thing to do, be out of the area and not try to sell stuff within the vicinity where it's being watched. But probably, maybe it's been a decade ago already, talking on this program about in the city, the pawn shops, we had set up a kind of a software program here with Marshfield PD. Is that still in effect and still going on?
Yes, as far as I know, and I was just talking to one of our detectives this morning. The pawn shops in Wisconsin, fall under certain guidelines to operate, and one of those things is that when somebody comes in there to sell something, they have to show a photo ID. So, that right away helps us, obviously, if the item that that person is trying to sell ends up being stolen. When we were talking earlier about like the catalytic converters, the more challenging part with that is a lot of those are going to scrap yards, and Wisconsin law does not require these scrap yards to do that same type of due diligence in figuring out who's coming in. And in fact, from some of the things I read around the nation, there's scrap yards advertising, hey, we'll buy this stuff, and almost, to a degree, almost encouraging that stuff to come in. And not to say that, if you own a scrap yard or something like that, that you couldn't legitimately come across some of those precious metals in catalytic converters and then obviously go sell them somewhere else if you wanted to. But a lot of it is being sold illegitimately, obviously, with the thefts that are occurring.
Well, as we talked about before, I can't imagine anybody would just hand me one of those and say, here, you either got saw marks on the end or something like that, and you go, this doesn't look right. It doesn't seem like it'd be that hard of a item not to pigeonhole as being stolen.
Yeah, I think some of them are probably removing some of that metal from the interior of the unit as well, so they're probably not seeing that, the saw marks like you indicated on the entire piece. But even so, with the way things are nationally trending, I would think it would cause suspicion from anybody wanting to purchase that stuff right now to wonder whether or not it was legitimately gotten or not.
How many used catalytic converters were being sold on the market before they realized what was in them? And, I don't know how much, like you said, what do they pay for those new to replace?
Thousands of dollars. It sounds like they're paying $2,000-$3,000 usually to get it replaced. So
I guess that's a pretty good take.
Yeah.
It's not exactly petty compared to a lot of things that could be or generally are stolen.
Right.
So those items here, as you're listening or watching the program here today, be aware. Cars, mostly joyriding is what he told us here, but as far as car parts, that's been something that we've seen over the years. But here, you can see, just Google it or on a search engine, what's the most stolen vehicle in your area. And what I came up with was a Dodge Caravan. I'm like, man, they're all over the place. Why would that be something that, well, because there are so many, they need a lot of parts, replacement parts, I guess, and they take them places and take them apart. But again, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. I've never known geographically why certain cars are stolen in X spot or however you put it. I didn't know that a Dodge Caravan was the most stolen car here, but and I wouldn't really be able to answer other than there's a lot of them. And I would imagine that probably trends up and down and crosses different cars. But yeah, that's a mystery on that one. But so if you own a Dodge Caravan, chalk that one up and make sure you lock it.
Well, there aren't many parts on mine they can use. I suppose they've been used pretty well already. You start to get in the double digits, hundreds of thousand miles on triple digits on them, they become less and less valuable. But for parts, at least, anyway. But just hard enough to get it to go in this cold air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of it is it's opportunity. It's like Travis said. It's is the car running? You had referenced problems we've had with what they call car shoppers over the years, and things being stolen from vehicles, and generally 99% of the time that's individuals walking down the street pulling car door handles until they find one that's open. It's pretty rare that you see a broken window or a forced vehicle entry, because there are so many people who do leave them unlocked and leave things in them that they want. So again, lowering the opportunity, that's good problem-oriented policing, and we really rely on the community's help with that to minimize their opportunity to take those things. So,
Well, is it that the key's in it? I mean, are they that easy to hotwire, or can you get the column apart?
see, very, very rarely do we see that either. It's, I would say almost, I don't ever want to say 100, but 99.9% of the time there's keys in the car.
Not only the door open, but the keys are in
Keys
it.
are in it.
Correct.
Yeah, money's in it, valuables.
Well, that would be a good time to lock it, just
would
for
be.
that reason alone. I mean, getting into the car and taking it.
Yeah.
And these aren't crimes of like high, how would I say, intellect here that you have to understand how to hotwire a car. Pull the door, and if the keys are in it, take it. It's
Right.
really not any more. And we seem to be that kind of trusting folk out here,
And that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't really realize or know that those things are happening, and it all depends on what's put out there in the news and where you're looking. But those things do happen. I would imagine there's some people out there that are surprised that we've had 6 vehicle thefts in the last month and a half. Usually when I talk to citizens and you tell them that, they're a little surprised at that.
Don't you have a place where there's tracking of what's going on around the city? A website or a map of some kind that you put out?
Yeah, there is some software out there. We're probably not going to continue that just because of the cost and the lack of use. Also, with a city our size, generally you could do an open records request for X number of vehicle thefts and where they're happening. It's really kind of hard to pinpoint specific areas. So we weren't really learning much from that software for what we were paying for it.
Is that why you got it, so that you could see where neighborhoods were clustered or things were happening?
That was the intent of it, yeah. And I think probably the most value comes from even when you look at car accidents, because that's really something that's of interest to us, is can you pinpoint a specific intersection where you're having more car accidents than not, or do you have an area where you can track it to speed, because then you can do some pro things such as enforcement, maybe looking at how that intersection is laid out or the signage. But there was some value there. But again, there's other ways we can track those things.
So at one time, now, is it still in effect, or is the contract run out on that?
Yeah, I believe it's still in effect for a small bit, but the contract is going to run out on that particular program. And I think what we as a department do is we're always looking for better ways to improve that. If there's other software out there that better fits that need. I know, I believe the alderpersons had access to that, as did our police and fire commissioners. But I don't know that the general public was ever, really using any of that software.
You did put it out, though. I mean, on a fairly regular basis. I've seen maps on a fairly regular basis of activity in the city. I don't know if it was on Facebook page or wherever it was put, but there you were putting it out there, and that gets me back to the point that you made, is that the citizens didn't know we had car thefts.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, where do you find that information out, other than if it's not on a police blotter in the local paper?
Yeah, and one of the things that we try to do is, get something out there on. Our Facebook page is very heavily followed, to the tune of somewhere around 30,000 likes or something or other. It is very heavily followed. It's been a great resource for us to put information out there. So that would be the next step for us to look at, is what can we put out there? Can we put some public service announcements out there, very similar to what Travis referenced, explaining the problem, how you can prevent it, and that's probably the next step for us. One of the issues or comments that had come up recently is, are there other things like Nixle and some of those other programs that are out there? All great programs, and we put a reminder out to the road lieutenants to use those programs. But because of our Facebook following and the reach that we have with it, that has by far been our most effective way to get information out there.
Well, you have another way right here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
We're
want to
using it
put
today.
together a script,
got
like
it.
once a week or something, we can run it on a weekly basis and freshen that up to what's
Sure.
happening. We used to do that at one time on this radio station.
Yep.
But things come and go. We'll maybe get back to that again if we're looking for ways to get information out to people. Talking with the Marshfield PD here, Lieutenant Travis Esser and Acting Chief Pat Zepps in on the program today. We'll continue the conversation. You can join in here if there's something that you'd like. 1450 WDLB's Inside program here for the second Friday in the month of February. You know that if you're listening live here on radio. You could be watching us in video, though, at marshfieldmediaaccess.org on their Facebook page, also on their homepage. Or you could be watching us on Channel 989 on your Spectrum digital tier. The city and government channels up around the 989, 91, I think, is where they are located. There's 3 different channels for the city. If you happen to be a Spectrum customer, talking here with Marshfield PD, Assistant Chief Pat Zepps, and also Lieutenant Travis Esser in here on today's program. And, well, not a whole lot to talk about, but there was some concern here as we talked about thefts that are happening in the area and how we find out about those. And citizens generally go about our business, and we don't think much of it until there's something like here on WDLB News where something is said, and then people are aware of what happens. But finding those kind of things out, and you guys pushing out warnings or maybe alerts to alert people that something needs to be done, we need to help get that out to people here in the community. But we also talked about the former Baltus property on 2nd and Chestnut, which is across from the law enforcement building, and that was purchased by the city, and now you're using that storage building. It's heated, right?
It is, yeah, at a lower temperature, but
at least it's not completely in the double digits below zero. And you mentioned, now tell me again here, you were talking about cost savings that we would actually be from getting that facility.
Yeah, I think the cost savings for the police department, and granted, it's a temporary use. It's a use for the building as long as the city has it. So we were happy to use it for as long as we're able to, so that there's a purpose to it. But you're going to see cost savings. At least I believe we will. This is the second winter we've been able to get in there in the neighborhood of fuel, idle time, which should cut down on our maintenance costs. Those are probably the 2 biggest ones that you're going to see from our standpoint. So there's also a security element too. When you look at the redesigning of a PD, it is nice to get some separation for those police vehicles, so they're not intermingled with everything else. It also frees up a good part of that lot. So I don't know what the long-term plans are for that. I know it's a temporary fix for us, but in the meantime we're using it, and I think it's going to save, at least on the fuel side, the maintenance side. So there are some bonuses there. And I know City Garage is also storing some things in there too, so we were happy to move our things around so they could get some equipment in there.
So there was a study done and some thought to what about that law enforcement building in the city? Did it need to be where it is? Could it be put somewhere else? How much would it cost to build a new as compared to revamp the one you have at that point?
Sure.
And then this opportunity came up across the street there. Yep. So are we going to move the department across the street? Or, I mean, what are we going to add a second story?
Well, we could put some offices in there, but I don't know if it'd be the most comfortable. No, I think the study and my involvement was that I don't have specific numbers for you, but one of the things that the city had looked at was maybe a renovation on that particular site might be the most feasible. Now, granted, there's been no decisions made in that area, but
which site?
The current site of the police department, where it stands now, was to renovate that because we are a functional department. Our level of service generally isn't affected by where we're at, but there are flow problems, and one of the things that we learned is when you're continually altering the interior of a building to fit your needs, that's where you start to encounter flow problems and things that might be more of an inconvenience for the citizens coming in, or security things as far as having suspects coming in and out of the building. So there's some room on that side to be done. We also are really struggling for evidence space. We've got 3 different areas where we're able to keep evidence, but we are outgrowing the building. It's an older building, but rest assured to the citizens that it doesn't, you're not going to see any effect on the day-to-day service that we're going to provide you. But I think it's something in the long-term plans of the city to take a look at that building and find out what the best option is moving forward. It was still very early in that process. What was the problem that precipitated the study? Where you not have enough room, or just, you said evidence. Is there a basement in that building? There is, and we have our detective bureau is housed down there. We've got a few other rooms down there. Part of the question that comes up is when you've got a building that's going on I don't know, it's well over 35 years old or so. How much money do you want to invest in it to make it what you need? And at what point do you move to a different site or really invest the money to fix what's wrong with it? And, we've got roof problems. We've had, storage problems for a long time on the west side of that building. One of our capital improvement plans or projects was to basically house that entire west lot so that you could have cars come in and out, patrol cars. And basically what you're looking at is a security measure. You're looking at the benefit that we have from using the Baltus building. You're cutting down on the idle time. Now, given the limited garage space we have for patrol cars, they're going to be idling on the west side of the PD, when an officer's in the building for some reason. If you could drive them in, get them out of the cold, you're taking away that entire problem. And it's also a security issue. So as we looked at some of those capital improvement projects, the question came is this the best way to move forward? Now, these are decisions that they're not mine to make. They're not a police chief's to make, but what really is the long-term goal and the best benefit for your buck for the city. So that's where it started.
So you're not landlocked there. I mean, it looks like a parking lot, and there's no buildings next to you. Was build out or up?
Well, I think a little bit of both. I mean, you've got to be careful on the south side there because you have public parking. And if you're going to take away public parking or parking from the Charles Apartments, I mean, you don't want to displace those people. So
where do you park? I mean, where do the people and employees in your building park?
Right on that south side, right in that lot. So really what you've got is the lot being used by employees, detective vehicles, and it's also a public lot. So
how many people are in that law enforcement building at any given time? At its peak, maybe during
I don't know
a day?
if I should say that. That might be some good intel.
You already told them where we park now.
I know.
Jeepers.
Well, that's okay. Your license number is...
Yeah.
We're pretty easy to find.
Yeah, that's true. A high profile there with the black and white cars. And speaking of that, how are those working now? We went from Interceptors and that were Mercuries and passenger cars to SUVs now. How's that working out in the wintertime? Better?
It's working great.
Really well.
Yeah, working great. In times where we've had big snowstorms in the past, we've actually had to move patrol into the few four-wheel drive cars that we had that were allocated for the Detective Bureau because they tend to travel, in the course of their investigations. So we don't have that problem anymore. I can personally attest that many years I worked the road, I got stuck several times. So it's a little bit embarrassing to have to call somebody to come pull you out when you're stuck in the snow. So, yeah, those have been working great.
Well, you've seen that video from Canada with the police department there, and the guy who's the perp, he's pushing his car, and the policeman, he's pushing his car, and they're chasing each other down the block, and neither one of them's going any faster than walking speed.
Yeah. It's we're always changing, always looking for the best cost-effective way because officers spend a lot of time in those cars, and it's basically an office on wheels, and we're continually putting more and more equipment in them. It makes it pretty tight. So the SUVs are a little bit bigger internally, so that's worked out really well. It's really been a trend in law enforcement. Pretty usable car, and if we're getting them at the right price, we're doing well with them. So
the old days of just a two-way radio with dispatch is long in the rearview mirror, isn't it?
That is long gone.
Computer with internet access.
Yep.
Laptops are right there that you can get their information as.
Yep.
Or do you still have dispatch run the information?
Yeah, both. It just depends on the circumstances. The officers can, we really try not to do that when we're driving, so that would be a time where you would use dispatch more to say, if you're going to run a license plate, to say, what is that plate, rather than, directing your traffic away or your attention away from what you're doing. So, but yeah, we use both.
Do you have single or double manned cars now? There was quite often, you see one Adam 12 there back in the day, for 40 years ago, that was a metropolitan area they were depicting on that show. But double rides now, do you still do that, or is everybody one per car?
It's generally one per car, but that doesn't stop, the ability. Sometimes we'll have some initiatives where we have more officers working. We may run double cars. If we have, a car down or something to that effect, we might run a car that has two officers in it that might be devoted for traffic for that night. So it does happen, but generally they're one-man cars.
Talking with Acting Chief Pat Zepps here and Lieutenant Travis Esser on today's Insight program on WDLB, the second Friday of the month. You can give us a call, 384-2191, 384-2192, just talking about the business, I guess, of law enforcement here, because there hasn't been, other than we talked about some car thefts and catalytic converters that are being stolen and fenced, I guess is the term, or, taken in for cash for what they're worth. And I know if you're tuning in and like me, you're going, what? Catalytic converter? Well, evidently there's minerals and parts of that in the newer models here that are quite valuable, worth a few $1,000s. So it has become, I guess, worth their while to work at it and take it in. And sometimes I wonder, the people that are taking it to, are they on the up and up here, or trying to get to the people who are taking them and say, would you help us out here and not take the stolen property? But I'm sure they, as you said earlier in the program, try to make it look like it's not.
Yeah. I would imagine, Travis, you can probably talk to that it passes hands. A lot of the more organized people, it passes hands several times before it really gets to where it's going. So it can be kind of challenging to follow that rabbit hole back. But, that's another thing, that I always like to let the public know, is that these things do take some time when you're working with other agencies to be able to develop a pattern and really track things back. It's like doing a drug investigation. So sometimes, we ask for patience, and if you don't hear something, it doesn't mean we don't have anything. It just, some of these take time. So,
well, this is, evidence, and you mentioned evidence room before. How long do you hold on to stuff, and what kind of stuff do you hold on to that you need to hang on to for what? If the court case is over and a conviction's been made, is it?
Yeah, and there's statutes of limitations out there for felonies and misdemeanors in general, but then for specific felonies and misdemeanors too, and that's kind of why we started running into the storage problems that Pat was referencing before. And it's mainly because we're having to hold on to evidence now a lot longer than years ago, and one of the main drivers of that is DNA evidence. Obviously now we can go back and solve some pretty old crimes based off of DNA evidence, and so we're holding on to a lot of that stuff, and we've overtaken a number of rooms that were used for other purposes within the police department just to accommodate that, and it's usually pretty full. And I'm myself and some of the other detectives that are evidence technicians are emptying out evidence lockers upstairs at the police department weekly and taking stuff down into our long-term storage in the basement, and finding ourselves always trying to make that little bit of extra room to make sure that we can continue to have space there to house that evidence that we're just going to be hanging on to for many years to come.
Well, as I said, a court case may be over and a conviction is made, but there's nothing that says how many years in before they get a reappeal.
Correct.
And then you need to find that original evidence from the case in order to have an appeal, and that's on you. Right,
correct. We have to hang on to all that stuff.
So at that point in time, how long, where does this end?
Yeah, in some cases it doesn't, because there's no statute of limitations on certain high-profile crimes, your first-degree sexual assaults and those types of things. We're holding on to any evidence we have in that indefinitely.
Well, we hear the term on the news about rape kit. How big is that generally?
Well, most of the kits that we have...
So swabs and clothing, right?
Yeah, well, it depends. And sometimes you have upholstery type property from people's houses as well, so we could be housing some pretty big things sometimes. But generally speaking, the evidence kits themselves are in boxes that are a foot wide by 2 inches tall by maybe 8 inches across or something like that. And but that's just some of the stuff that we collect. We obviously collect tons of other things. That we got grocery bags full of things that are stacked on shelves, and we collect a certain number of firearms and knives from things, and lots of drug paraphernalia, and that stuff just all takes up space, and it gets to be an organized mess at the end that we just got to keep everything together.
I know years ago when I was a kid, get my geezer on here, when I was a kid, but there was things like bicycles, and you'd finally get a ton of them at the garage there, and at some point they'd have a sale.
Yeah, we have a ton of them. Yeah. It's amazing how many bikes are in this city that people don't claim when we find them, or or they're stolen.
How do they find? This gets back to knowing where to go again.
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of it's got to come from people not reporting them stolen, because if somebody were to call and report a bike stolen, one of the first things we would do would be to check for them. To check our inventory to see if this thing was found or turned over.
Well, I'm afraid I'm implicating myself because I didn't have it licensed.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point out there, and it kind of speaks to what Travis had mentioned earlier. It might seem like a little bit of an inconvenience, but please come in and register the bikes, because that's huge in getting your bike back. But I will also throw out there that any citizen at any given time, if they're missing a bike, can come in and take a look at those. But it's always better if your bike is stolen, please report it. Because it gives us at least an ability to try to get some of these things back where they belong.
And a number of years ago, to try to make that process even easier, we made bike registration free, I believe, right? It was still free. It used to cost like $5 every so often, every 5 years, I think it was, or something. So it wasn't like it was expensive, but in an effort to try to get people to get those registration tags on the bikes, we don't even charge for it anymore. It's just a very easy way for us to backtrack that bike if it would be stolen.
Is that, this gets kind of nitpicky, but is that a citable offense? I mean, if somebody were on a bike at the time that crossing, jaywalking, or what, I don't know what you'd get them on a bike, but not a stolen crimes, usually you'd use something a little more quicker than a bicycle, but you never know. But when you encounter people, do you ask for registration? Like the DNR will ask for your boat registration or anything like that. Do you bother doing that? Is that something you can...
Not real often, we don't. I mean, unless we recognize that bike just based off of it, the description of it as something that we might be looking at for a stolen. But oftentimes we're contacting people on bikes for a variety of other reasons, like you said, So, we don't generally ask for registration with bikes. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's pretty low, the people that actually register their bicycles. Yeah,
and you got a lot of them there. Do you have sales? Does the city do that?
Yeah, usually in the spring we'll put them out on auction. We'll, we used to do a PD auction. We kind of changed our method of operation. We use a local organization to actually put all those bikes on auction for us. So,
is that a software you use, or is that a private entity that comes in and helps you?
It's a private entity.
Okay, so they'll come in and do that for you.
Yeah, they'll come in and pick them up, and they'll put them out on auction for us. And it's similar to how we sell our used vehicles. We use a Wisconsin surplus.
So those might not be just like it used to be. Every city had their little local event. Now this goes to a statewide or a wider event.
Well, for the bikes, it's local, but I don't know how far reach he goes. But really, the cost and the time to put that auction together for us as a department, for what we made on it was not really cost effective. So, if there's a company out there, and there are more and more of them that want to come and take those items, put them out on auction, they'll take a small percentage of it, or whatever the percentages of the sale. We're still coming out ahead as a department, rather than paying all our employees for over the course of a weekend, even prior to that, to go through inventory everything, get everything ready for auction. It's a pretty labor and time intensive effort, so it's worked out well for us.
You hear about sheriff's auction, sometimes property or whatever the case may be that was lost or up in a legal battle. That's not something the city communities do?
Yeah, if there's something that we're done with and the owner doesn't want it back, or we're not able to give it back, if it's something that we can auction, we can do that. But it has to be property that's turned over to the police department. So 99% of that is going to be something that the owner doesn't want back, or something that was never claimed, like the bikes that we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's a tough one too. I mean, like you said, how long do you wait before you say, well, it's not going to be claimed, 1 year, 2 year? I mean, the value of the item, and then somebody comes down and says, well, I was, sorry. Yeah. What else can you say? I mean, you can't hold on to everything you've got. You can give us a call here, 384-2191, 384-2192, talking with Lieutenant Travis Esser and Acting Chief Pat Zepps here on today's Insight program, this second Friday of the month of February. AM 1450, WDLB's Inside program here for this second Friday in the month of February. And you know that if you're listening live. You could be watching us, though, on marshfieldmediaaccess.org or their Facebook page or on the cable channels. Spectrum 989 is the government channel that we have, or Civic channel, Citizens channel. 989, 990, 991, I believe, are the ones that they use for that. So if you have a chance, all the government meetings and things like that, City Communications Department is on top of that and puts it all together for you through Marshfield Media Access, and you get a chance to see the workings of your city. Today, the second Friday of the month, we're talking with Marshfield PD. Today, Travis Esser, Lieutenant, is in here, and also Acting Chief Pat Zepps. Just for you, a little birdie told me that you have a special day coming up, or is it today?
I don't know who would have told you that, but nope, not. That's if you're talking about what I think you're talking about, that's tomorrow.
Okay. Well, we have some people here who would like to say something.
From all of us at the Marshfield Police Department, happy 50th birthday, Pat Zepps.
Happy birthday, Pat!
Hey, happy birthday from your karate buddies. This is Pat.
This is Dan.
Happy 50th birthday, Zepps.
Hey, Pat, this is your buddy Lance. Congratulations on hitting the half-century mark. You've come a long way since second grade CCD. Happy birthday, buddy.
Happy 50th birthday, Beetlejuice, from Steve, Kathy, and the kids.
Hey, Pat, it's your buddy John down in Texas, wishing you a happy 50th. Welcome to the 5-0 Club, my friend.
Hey, Pat, it's Kate. Happy 50th, buddy. You old man, I love you, and I'm so proud of you. Bye.
This is your birthday song. It isn't very long. That's it. Happy 50th, Pat. Lots of love from your big sister, Jenny.
Hey, Pat, this is Nora. I just wanted to say happy 50th birthday and welcome to AARP.
Hey, Pat, this is Les. Happy birthday. Welcome to the other side of the century.
Hey, Dad, this is Eli, and I wanted to wish you happy birthday, and you're the greatest dad in the world.
This is Isaac, and I hope you have a great day.
Happy birthday.
Hi, sweetie. It's Julie. Just want to wish you the most fabulous birthday ever, and you make 50 look good, by the way. Love you.
That's because he's got a mask on.
I'm sitting here how is this even possible?
A lot of work was done, and I'll tell you who later on.
Yeah, I got to know, because this is like absolute total shock to me.
A lot of people from a lot of your life.
Yeah, I don't even have the words right now. I don't even know how that was even organized or thought of. But thank you to everybody if you're still listening or any of that. But yeah, that's very humbling.
Oh, the program's being recorded, and they all want one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have the words right now.
So when you got into this business, or when life, come out of high school and things like that, was this something you looked into, or had an idea that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think, a lot of us, you always have an idea. I ended up going to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and did my time, and ended up with a criminal justice degree, and so I went that route, and I kind of put myself through recruit school. So I think it's one of the things I always had an idea of. And, looking back, I've got, it'll be 24 years in. It's been everything I could have ever imagined. It's been great serving this community. I've spent my whole career here. First time I was here was for the interview, and we never left. So it's been a great place to live and raise a family and work with amazing people.
Well, it's like that saying, welcome to Wisconsin, come for the cheese and don't leave because your car don't start.
Exactly.
Well, happy birthday to you. And,
thank you very much.
Assistant Chief and Acting Chief Pat Zepps here, along with Travis Esser, Lieutenant for Marshfield PD. Thank you guys for coming in and availing yourself to our questions.
You bet. Thank you anytime.
Keeping us up to date on what's happening in the police department. We'll be talking to you again coming up next week. It's Wood County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel, and then the final Friday of the month is Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker on the Inside program here. Fridays during the month, we feature government officials so that you can talk to them and find out what's happening in your world here on WDLB. I'm Jeff Cannon, back in the noon hour with a look at news, weather, sports, agricultural news, and more, so don't go away.